So some announcements, learning announcements. A year of learning sponsored by Julia Boris Kagan to commemorate the year of Julia's father, Yosef Ben Muddle, and a month of learning sponsored by the Markowitz and Haskell families to commemorate the year of Mr. Leah Markowitz, Chesbor Aryeh Ben Naftali. Okay, an email is going to go out today on Monday. We're going to have a Bagels and Lox breakfast sponsored by Miriam Leofsky to commemorate the Shloshim from Mr. Abowski. That will go out today. If you'd like to join us, just send me an email no later than Friday, but my email will tell you exactly what to do. Also, it looks like we're going to be on with the it's called the Lunch and Learn this Sunday barbecue on, I think it's May 17th. There's some information on that as well. Okay.
Okay, good morning, everybody. This morning's topic is, technically it's called, can you wear a political yarmulke to shul? Like a MAGA yarmulke or some other type of political statement. Can you wear that yarmulke when you come to shul, which should be a place that there's no politics discussed. So in order to understand the parameters of that particular discussion, we have to go a little bit into the history of yarmulkes. Where do we get that from? When did it start? How significant? Is it a halacha? Is it a minhag? Is it just a Jewish practice that grew over the years? What does yarmulke? What's the word yarmulke? Yarmulke, how you pronounce it? Kippah is a relatively recent term. Kippah means a dome, a head. So the head covering became called a kippah. Head coverings come in all different sizes, shapes, and colors. So question number one is there any particular halacha about the color, size, and shape of a yarmulke? So, and there are different periods of time for different types of head covering. For example, if you're davening, Shmona Esrei, Kedusha, Kaddish, the Dvarim Shebikdusha, things that require a minyan, require covering of the head, Kisei Harosh. So that's why many people will put a talus over their head, because the kippah, the yarmulke, doesn't cover enough of their head. So there's a halakhic concept of, I guess, covering one's head shows a certain amount of awe and reverence and respect. And think about it, every major religion, the clergy covers their head. They wear different types, whether it's conical or whether it's a turban. I mean, popes and bishops, and they also wear a yarmulke. Muslim, I mean, every religion. So a head covering indicates that there is something above you. People have suggested that the word yarmulke comes from Yirei Moko or Yirei Malka, fear or reverence for the king, or Moko, the heavens. I remember I grew up in a shul full of European immigrants, and one gentleman, one like a boy, once told me in his accented Yiddish, Yirai Mukum. The Yirai Mukum from yarmulke is not too far to go. The word yarmulke shows fear of heaven. Okay. The word yarmulke itself is very similar to Slavic languages for skull cap. A jarmulke, I think, is correct me if I'm wrong, Janusz, in pronunciation. Jarmulke means a cap, a skull cap. I'm not pronouncing it right. Other Slavic languages very similar. So we adopted it from other languages. Historically, however, I'm not so sure that everybody always wore a yarmulke. I mean, the standard question is, how do we know Moshe Rabbeinu wore a yarmulke? And the answer is, would Moshe Rabbeinu not wear a yarmulke? You can say the same thing with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But clearly, this was not necessarily a mandated practice until probably the Mishnaic or Talmudic period. We have a number of references about that. Mar Kedushin talks about Rav Huna, who would not walk Dalet Amos without having his head covered. Because the divine presence is above my head, he would say. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's mother, good Jewish mother, would keep on telling him, cover your head, cover your head. And the fact that she would constantly tell him that, it's a Gemara in Masechet Shabbos, Kuf Nun Vav, because apparently he didn't do it all the time. So it was not necessarily a fixed practice until somewhat later, but people always understood conceptually. The Rambam writes that the Shechina was always thought to be resting above one person. Shechina is always there, God's presence. So you have to behave respectfully. And the respectful way to do that is to cover your head.
Excuse me.
Now,
I have a question.
yeah.
Don't bite my head off.
We cover it, we won't bite.
Good. So, I don't want to open a Pandora's box, but this sure sounds like we of the female persuasion are second class and we don't have a kesher, a connection to the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and we don't need to acknowledge that there's a greater thing, and we don't need to, have none of these covering head things that you've mentioned for rationale for it seems to include women.
Like, we don't have a Kedusha either, we don't have a Shechina above us.
It's an excellent question. I'll answer it in two ways. First of all, sociologically, most women throughout history always walked around with a shawl over their heads. I don't know the historical origin of that fact, but in almost every culture, women always covered their hair, married, unmarried. This was just, now whether originally it was because of Yirah Shamayim, I can't say, but women always did. Of course, married women cover their hair for different reasons, but it's an excellent question. It's an excellent question.
It was really her question.
All right,
It just seems to me that you talk about the Kedusha and okay, well, what are we?
Well, so
We're kind of
the correct answer is that women have a much higher level of Kedusha, and therefore they don't need any external reminders because they are at a much higher level.
Oh.
We're always given that backhanded answer.
Yes.
You go to a courtroom, you show respect by taking your covering off.
So that's an American custom, I think, or European custom, by showing, because.
Or a religious, like a church, you go well in the church.
Yeah, and the church also. So take off your hat. So that would be an interesting area to pursue in general. Why in some cultures wearing a hat is a sign of reverence, whereas in other cultures bareheadedness is a sign of respect.
In the
humility.
In the olden days,
Humility,
when
maybe.
more men wore like a fedora, I think like if the man was wearing a hat in an elevator and a woman came in,
Take off the hat.
I remember my father doing that. It was like, what?
My father, Olav Sholem, wore a hat every day to work. because that's how people dressed. But then again, in those days, people went to the ball game dressed in a suit and tie too. And women wore gloves. I mean, it was a whole different world. In any event, yeah. Coming back to, yeah.
We don't give a yarmulke develops. I can't consider with Moshe wearing a yarmulke. I can't see Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Moshe when they prayed to Hashem that they didn't have something on their head. So the yarmulke might have been something that was developed within time. In other words, when they were praying, maybe they always kept their hair covered, but then
Well, because
they moved on to all the time.
the type of clothing that they wore, more like a cloak, they would just throw it over their heads. I don't think the Avos wore hats per se. What's that?
They didn't wear white shirts and black
Yeah,
pants.
of course, they didn't have shirts. It was more like a cloak, like a serape, what do you call it, a poncho type of thing. They throw, and they just toss it over their heads.
But I think when they davened, which we know they did, I think they kept their head covered.
So again, in all probability, it may sound sacrilegious to say this, but in all probability, the custom of wearing a head covering per se did not really become widespread until the Talmudic period. Because that's just not how people dressed. How they prayed, again, would Moshe Rabbeinu not have worn a yarmulke? I mean, it's interesting how people project backwards. I remember very clearly, many, many years ago, I went to the Baba Vershtibel on Simchas Torah, experience by itself. And in the Baba Vershtibel, there was this huge, like a billboard, showing the Ushpizin. And all the Ushpizin were dressed in Hasidic garb, with Streimlach and Payas and the black coats. That's how and of course, sitting at the head of the table was the Baba Rebbe himself, like Mashiach, but that's another story. But all the Ushpizin were dressed in Hasidic garb, with the Streimels and people project backwards based on their current situation. Head coverings throughout the Middle Ages, in many cases, were legislated by the Christian governments that Jews had to wear a certain type of head covering to show they were Jewish. Now, it worked very nice with the halacha of having your head covered. But if anybody has, or you go online, the old Jewish encyclopedia, not the Encyclopedia Judaica, the original Jewish encyclopedia, first published in 1910, under, I think, Jewish costume, there's a fold-out in color of how Jews dressed throughout history. And it's fascinating, but they all had different types of head coverings. Stocking caps or berets or streimler, different types of head coverings. Now, without going into all the details of how it evolved, I would say for the past 700 years or so, it's standard accepted that Jewish men would wear a head cover of one type or another. If you're in a Sephardic country, you would wear a turban. If you were in Europe, you'd wear a hat or some other type of a cap. The kippah, as we know it, the yarmulke that we know how, is a relatively modern invention. And there are a lot of questions about the yarmulke. For example, Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked a shaila, if I have a job and I'm working in an office, and part of my job is that I can't wear a yarmulke, can I go to work in that office without wearing a yarmulke? And again, he was makil, he was very lenient in that specific case because a person's parnasa was involved, etc. But clearly, it's not preferable. Obviously, if you're working in a back office as an accountant or something, it's less of a problem. But if you're a lawyer's office or another kind of business where you're with people, sometimes the policy is that you can't wear a yarmulke. I had a friend who, for that very reason, wore a toupee to avoid the issue. But again, today it's accepted in almost every field of endeavor. People wear yarmulkes. It's not a problem at all. Okay, the type of now, the head covering that we wear in contemporary Jewish life has many, many, many different versions. You have anywhere from the bottle cap kippot that some people wear, the tiny little things just barely stick on their head, to the Rab Nachman type of things that huge yarmulke cover your entire head, and everything in between. Black velvet, crocheted, different colors. So question number one, if we're wearing a head covering to show reverence for the Shekhinah above us, is it appropriate in general to have different colors, sports teams, political slogans, whatever you want, on your yarmulke? Is that appropriate? That's a question. I'm not prepared to answer that because everybody does it. But it's a question. Be aware that if you're wearing a head covering as a religious garment, is it appropriate to have that religious garment in all different shapes and colors and slogans and so forth?
The people that wear white kippah, the people wear black kippah, people wear blue.
Okay, so a black kippah or a white kippah on Yom Kippur, for example, or a white kippah if you belong to certain Hasidic sects in Yerushalayim, there are Arla Hasidim, they were white, but they're doing it as a sign of reverence. All right, most people who wear a Knicks yarmulke or a yarmulke with some other slogan or a person's name on it or different colors are not doing it necessarily for religious purposes. So that's question number one, how appropriate it might be. I'm not answering it, I'm just raising the question.
Even if you have a special one that you wear, let's say on Shabbos, like if you had your name, like if you wear a plain one during the week, but you specifically wear one with your name on it on Shabbos because it's nicer, it's like a huge
Okay.
in your mind in terms of why you're doing it.
I'm raising the question, I'm not answering because I don't have an answer. And I'm not the one that would give the answer.
And how is that different than wearing a baseball hat to cover your head?
All right, it's a good question. It's a good question. Now, the baseball hat to cover your head might be of necessity depending where you are.
Not necessity. You're choosing today to wear a baseball hat because you like to wear a hat. It's sunny outside.
Okay, so the question is, if you're wearing it for religious purposes or you're wearing it not to get a sunburn?
How about both? Why can't it be both?
Okay. These are all good questions.
And just when you think about, granted, it's a different thing, but it's some attire in Israel for Shabbos among some, even Orthodox Jews is a lot more casual than here.
That's a whole different question that
So wearing in America a baseball hat, or the very fact that like at a lot of these camps, summer camps, Shabbos attire is different than maybe you would wear in your home shul because it's less formal.
Are you saying that a yarmulke is holier than a baseball hat?
Ooh.
It's an interesting question. These are all questions that it depends on the team, right?
No team on it.
Yeah, no, I don't think, if you're wearing a plain baseball hat without any designation, it certainly has the same status as a regular yarmulke. If you're wearing one,
The team makes a difference. Wow.
I don't have an answer for that.
Don't worry, I don't wear.
If you're wearing it, again, if you're wearing it to proclaim your allegiance to a certain team, that might take away from the fact you're wearing it for religious purposes, which is why, for example, there's a certain segment in our society that, like my late father would say, they're too has religious. They'd wear a yarmulke and a hat on top of the yarmulke. All right, and they don't deviate from that. Maybe a nicer hat on Shabbos, but they wear a yarmulke and a hat on top of it. That's their particular practice. If you're wearing something for a religious purpose, should it be used for advertising your allegiance to a team or a political figure in general? I'm raising the question. I'm not answering that question. I don't have I'm not the one to answer that. However, when it comes to Shabbos and it comes to shul, different ballgame. Pardon the pun. We talked once before about whether rabbis should engage in politics, shul. And clearly the answer is no. Shul is not a place for politics. Shul is a place for davening and learning. That's it. So any type of interference that's going to cause a discussion not relating to davening or respect in a shul is inappropriate. So, for example, if somebody comes to shul during World Series season wearing a yarmulke emblazoned with a team that he supports, and there are other people who support another team, and you get into a whole discussion, as very often happens, unfortunately, people talk about sports in shul, that's inappropriate.
How about if he's up there giving a speech and he recommends who to vote for? So this is
Totally
not-
inappropriate.
So this is, it's definitely helping the Jewish people, right? If he tells you to vote for the Jewish candidate kind of guy versus, Kamala.
No.
So,
But we didn't say.
I think it's maybe necessary.
A rabbi has to, again, we're getting off topic now. A rabbi has to be impartial when it comes to politics. Because no matter who he supports, no matter if it's good for the Jews or not good for the Jews, there will be a sizable number of people in shul who disagree. And that's going to cause friction. And a rabbi can't be put in that position. That's how I feel. That's how others feel as well. Yeah.
There are situations, for instance, where government now will subsidize, couples for tuition in school.
Yes.
That's not I think everybody would agree that that's
Yes.
something that
All right. So
there
good.
are situations where it's political, but that's the situation where
Correct.
everybody's in agreement.
The only time I ever heard Rabbi Yudin ever take a political position, there was a bill in the assembly in Trenton to allow physician-assisted suicide, and it was put on the ballot, and that was the only time he ever spoke to go out and vote against it. That was the only time he ever spoke about politics that I can remember in all the years I've been in the shul. Only time, because a rabbi cannot take sides on most issues unless it's clearly black and white. Like in that case, it's still a little bit. You're right, but again, we have to look at the politics involved. If there are some people that are going to feel otherwise about it, then it's problematic. Milton.
Okay, but these days, all Rabbanim talk about support for Israel. And they don't say it's political, but it is political when they have support for Israel and strong support for Israel. So they all imply a political vote on your part.
Yeah, it's a slippery. It's a very slippery slope. It's a very slippery slope because even when you're pro-Israel, there are things in Israel you may not like. Whether you support Netanyahu, you don't support Netanyahu. Whether you support going into Lebanon, not going into. I mean, all these. We have strong feelings about it, and again, rabbis have to be very, very careful when they speak about these topics, unless it's totally black and white and there's no opposition to it.
And one other question concerning this, keep covering your head. I remember when I was in Salvation, we had a teacher named Margaret Shuni. She used to come back from recess. He used to go to me, Moshe, Avodah Zarah HaKadur. Then he used to go, Moshe, kach daim sim al rosh yoter tov me'akipashach. So he didn't like the small yarmulkes. He used to have a big yarmulke like a chazan. We used to call it, the kids on the side, a goon he cap, because his name was Gershuni. And then when we read it in the Torah about Guni Mishpachas Haguni, whoever had to read that, was afraid to read it because that was the case. But I know that was the case. When my mother was nifter and I davened with my father in Washington Heights, Shari, I took her in the morning. They made me put on the big yarmulke, big Guni cap. I had to wear that. The regular yarmulke, even the size of this, I didn't wear it tight.
I had that experience also. When I was in high school, my mother, Aleh Shalom, crocheted many different kippot for me, different colors. And when I was, I started learning with my father's cousin in the Bronx. Did it for 8 years with him. I used to walk from Inwood to the Bronx. It was a couple of miles, a long walk. But every Shabbos I'd walk there, and he davened in a Hasidic shtibel, Anshe Krashnik, with Moshe Bick, great gadol. And the first time I went in there, I wore a sport jacket, a colored kippah, and very quietly took out a black velvet yarmulke and plopped it on my head and said, "This is what you have to wear here." And then I eventually became a little bit more conservative in what I wore when I went to that shtibel to daven. But clearly speaking, this indicates, again, there are certain groups of people, and I want to finish up, there are certain groups of people who always wear large black kippot. Because kisui harosh, when you're davening, you have to cover your head, and then these tiny little kippot may not qualify. A shul is a place for davening. It's not a place for sports. It's not a place for politics. And sometimes some of the kippot that people will wear to advertise how they feel about a certain candidate or a certain sports team might upset somebody else who supports a different candidate or a different sports team. And that discussion would be interfering with the whole purpose of you being in shul. So the short answer, politics don't belong in shul, period. Neither from the rabbi's pulpit or from in the pews either. And therefore, the answer to the question is, can you wear a politically oriented kippah in shul? And my answer would be no. Now, in general, can you wear kippot that have political slogans or sports slogans? You know, because what's the purpose of wearing a kippah? If the purpose of wearing a kippah is yiras hamakom, then it's got nothing to do with all the decorations or advertising or affiliations and so forth. And again, if everybody walks around with a black yarmulke, you know, people will be very unhappy because that's not our current culture. And people have kippot with designs and different colors. It's an interesting question. It's a fascinating question, which I'm not prepared to take a position on, but clearly the answer to the question is political kippot in shul are definitely prohibited. In all probability, sports kippot for different teams would also probably be problematic in shul, because if I wear a kippah that says "Go Celtics" and I'm a Knicks fan, I'm going to be upset. The same thing with baseball teams or football teams. So I think when you're in shul, there's a different level of consciousness that we should be aware of in terms of how we dress. Now, for example, I have a whole bunch of neckties for different occasions. I have a matzah necktie. I have a Hamantashen necktie. I have an Israeli flag necktie. I have different ties to reflect the different occasions. But it's not something that now maybe I'm wrong, that I feel would interfere with shul decorum, shall I say, other than the fact that very cool necktie. I like it. Nobody's going to object to a matzah necktie on Pesach. No one's going to object to a Hamantashen necktie on Purim.
Are you saying because the tie is not something that represents Yiras Hashem, that's why it's a different
Well,
situation
not only that, but it doesn't interfere with the ambiance or decorum in the shul necessarily.
With the, I'm asking, take the matzah or the Hamantashen or the Jewish star and stick it on your kippah.
No, there's a difference between a kippah and a
Yiras
necktie.
Hashem.
Yes, absolutely. That would be my initial feeling about it.
I saw some people have 8-pack
Yeah, yeah.
Consider that political.
That's definitely, and again,
Now it's political.
that's definitely political. Whether you agree with AIPAC or you don't agree with AIPAC, it's definitely a political statement. Definitely. Even if you wear a tzahal kippah, and many people do, the green and yellow. I mean, well, again, we have to understand what is the two things. What's the purpose of a yarmulke? What's the purpose of being in shul? And anything that detracts from either of those two things would be problematic.
But you're saying even something like a little color or name on a solid black kippah to you is still not 100% Yiras Hashem.
And then you'd be saying to bar mitzvah families,
Yeah.
don't,
No logo.
they don't figure out a logo, don't this.
Yeah, I would think that would be,
Let your son wear a plain black yarmulke.
again, dating myself, but going back to the 50s, at every bar mitzvah or at every wedding, they would give out the silk kippot. And the inscription would be in the inside of the yarmulke,
Yes.
but it would be in all types of colors of the rainbow. And now the only time you see that today, Syrian Jews like to wear those silk kippot, if you ever noticed it. Syrian Jews like this big silk kippot in all kinds of colors of the rainbow. But that was a custom then. You inscribe it in gold inside the yarmulke, not on the outside. In different colors.
Why?
Again, does it take away from the ambiance of being in shul? Okay, you're right. So I think we have to think about, again, we can have a whole other separate shiur on proper dress in shul. I've written about that. Some of your questions. Yes.
Why, yeah. Would a kippah saruga be considered not religious in a shul?
According to some people, it's not respectful enough.
According to you, it's not.
Even if it's
respectful.
all
No,
black.
kippah sruga, it's all black.
An all black kippah sruga is less problematic, I would
If it
think.
has a tefillin, it has colors on it, you're not okay with that.
Would a woman wear a kippah be considered degradation?
If a woman wears a kippah, interesting question. Interesting question. I think women who wear kippot are wearing it for religio-political reasons, if I can put it that way. It's somewhat religious, it's somewhat political. And they're usually very small. And they're usually embroidered with pearls or other kinds of decorations in there.
Wear only black hats, not colored hats.
Again, I'm not advocating that we should all dress in black. But again, if the kippah is a religious item of seriousness, then you can't get more serious than black. Again, there are segments of our Jewish community that will only wear black. Why do some people always walk around in a jacket and tie in the Jewish community? Why? Not because it's a fashion statement, but because there are halachos of how you dress when you daven. And since you daven 3 times a day, changing back and forth, so you wear proper clothing all day long. So when you come to daven, you're properly dressed. And being properly dressed also includes wearing a hat. I remember very clearly, after shiur, we'd always daven mincha. And we're getting ready to daven mincha, and our Soloveitchik says to one of the boys, please get me my hat. So the guy was a wise guy, and he says, you know, Rebbe, you really technically don't have to wear a hat to daven mincha. So our Soloveitchik said to him, you may be right, but my father always wore a hat, my grandfather always wore a hat, now get me my hat. These are fascinating discussions, and we can go on for a long time about it. Yeah.
With all due respect, I think there are more important things to be concerned about and be distracted by in davening than a kippah. And
No question about it.
you know, the constant talking, the bringing in your coffee cup. Who the heck brings in a coffee? If you were meeting with like
I couldn't.
a head of a country, would you walk in with your coffee cup?
I agree 100%. If
yarmulke is the worst thing.
If I remember, I'll send you some articles that I wrote on just that topic. Clearly, you're 100% correct. That's the decorum in shul in many places leaves much to be desired. Not only, I mean,
I'm sorry, I'll retract.
no. I mean, how people dress when they come to shul, especially in the summer months, coming up to the warmer season now, and how people come dressed to shul, men and women. It's a particular concern of mine. It drives me crazy to see how people come to shul sometimes on Shabbos and Yom Tov. But that's a whole other topic, and they'll get me in hot water, so I'm not going to start it. But in any event, a kippah as an item of religious headwear should not be used for political purposes in general, I would think, and certainly not in shul. So it's something to be concerned about. Whatever you do in shul, it should be towards davening, period. And anything that takes away from davening, whether it's a kippah with a message on it, whether it's people who wear pins or buttons for a political candidate, that clearly is inappropriate for a shul. And again, yarmulke, coming from the word yiras makom, should be sufficient to tell us that it may not necessarily have to always be black, but it shouldn't be used as a billboard either. Have a wonderful day out there.
Thank you, Wally.
Thank you. Rabbi, sign of a ref.
Yishem Adonai Baruch Me'atov Yadollah. Baruch Shalom Mishalot V'chayinu. Tivla Kol Mechin Mazon Kol B'Yosef Asher Baruch Baruch Ato Adonai Hazon Yisachol. Amen. Amen.
I'll tell you my yarmulke story. In the early 70s, when I was looking for a job, I wrote my kippah to go. At that time, you didn't have the computers.
Right.
You had to go from employment agency to employment agency. Right. And I was having a very difficult time getting a job. So I spoke to my cousin, who told me, listen, you have a heter, especially in your situation. Take off your yarmulke. And I did. I ended up getting a job and working for the city. So now it's like 20, so it must have been about 2000.